It was a warm Sunday morning in Lincoln Park, just outside the city. Families were setting up picnic blankets, couples strolled with iced coffees, and a woman in a gray hoodie jogged the eastern trail near the water. Her pace was steady, her expression focused. She wore wireless earbuds and sunglasses, and her hair was tied back tightly in a low bun. To anyone watching, she looked like just another fitness enthusiast getting in her miles before the day got too hot. But Officer Calloway didn't see it that way. He had received a vague complaint about a suspicious person lingering too long around the park's north gate. No crime reported. No clear description. Just enough to send 2 patrol officers on foot to check it out. Calloway and his partner, Officer Reese, walked the loop, scanning the crowd. That's when Calloway locked eyes on the woman. "She fits," he muttered, motioning toward her with a tilt of his chin. Reese hesitated. "You sure? She's just jogging." Calloway didn't answer. He picked up pace and approached the woman head-on, gesturing for her to stop. She slowed, pulling out one earbud, brows slightly furrowed. "Ma'am, I need to ask you a few questions," Calloway said firmly. The woman straightened. "About what?" "Suspicious activity. We need to see your ID." She blinked. "I'm jogging. I don't carry an ID when I run." "That's not a valid excuse," Calloway snapped. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." "What?" "I haven't done anything wrong," she replied, calm but incredulous. Calloway moved in. Reese hovered uncertainly behind. "You're resisting a lawful command." "I'm not resisting. I'm standing still," she said, carefully. But Calloway didn't wait. He reached for her arms. That's when everything unraveled, fast. She pivoted. A precise sidestep. A sweep of his leg. Calloway hit the grass with a thud, stunned. Reese shouted, reaching for his baton. The woman turned fully, both hands raised. "I highly recommend you stop right now," she said coldly. "I'm not your average jogger." Reese froze mid-step. Something in her tone wasn't just confident. It was commanding. And in her pocket, a badge, small, metallic, unmistakable, glinted just beneath the zipper. Reese stood motionless, his baton half-drawn. The woman's voice wasn't panicked. It wasn't defensive. It was controlled, almost like an order, and it made him hesitate just long enough to notice what Calloway hadn't, the badge. She slowly unzipped the pocket of her hoodie and held it out without stepping forward. "Special Agent Kyla Trent. Department of Homeland Security. Tactical Response Division," she said, loud enough for both officers to hear. "And unless either of you has a federal warrant or a credible threat report, you just assaulted a federal officer in a public park." Reese's face went pale. Calloway, still getting up from the grass, scoffed. "Nice prop. You think flashing a badge excuses? I suggest you read the number on the back, Officer Calloway," she cut in sharply. "Go ahead. Call it in. I'll wait." Calloway stepped forward, grabbing the badge aggressively. But the moment his eyes hit the serial, his mouth clamped shut. Reese leaned over and whispered, "That's a real clearance code. I've seen those in training. Tier 4 tactical." Kyla kept her hands visible and calm. The crowd nearby had started to take notice, some standing, others filming with their phones. The tension shifted rapidly from suspicion to concern. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Did they just grab a federal agent? Was she attacked? She said Homeland Security. Calloway's jaw tightened. His voice dropped. "You didn't ID yourself right away." "I wasn't required to," Kyla answered flatly. "Jogging in a public park doesn't make me a suspect." "You escalated. You laid hands without cause. That's on you. Reese looked around, visibly anxious now. We need a supervisor on site, he muttered. No, Kyla said, her tone even colder now. You need internal affairs. I'm activating a formal complaint, and I'll be naming both of you in the incident report. She reached into her other pocket and tapped her phone. A recording had already been running since the moment Calloway first approached. Both officers stared at each other, stunned. Then she added quietly, You still think I'm just a jogger? Officer Reese backed up a step, scanning the growing circle of onlookers. The situation had spiraled far past their control. Calloway still clutched the badge, his confidence visibly draining as Agent Kyla Trent stared him down without flinching. Kyla's finger moved with precision across her phone screen. I'm contacting DHS Command to report field interference by local law enforcement, she said. Reese finally spoke. Wait. Hold on. Maybe we can talk about this first. You had your chance to talk, she replied, eyes not leaving Calloway. You decided to put your hands on someone without probable cause. You thought I was just another easy target. That ends now. She pressed the screen and brought the phone to her ear. Agent Trent reporting. I'm on temporary leave status, yes, but I've been assaulted in the field by uniformed officers, Des Calloway and Reese. Lincoln Park, East Trail, no warrant, no explanation, no lawful order. Confirming that this interaction is being recorded, and yes, I will be filing an incident report with full footage. Calloway started to interrupt, but she raised a finger. Yes, I want local internal affairs looped in. And DHS legal. I'm standing my ground, unarmed, no threat posture. They initiated force. Then her tone shifted. Understood. I'll remain on site. She hung up. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, from behind the officers, a tall man in plain clothes emerged from a nearby bench. His movement was slow and deliberate, hands visible. Kyla, he called gently. She turned. I'm good. But I'll need you as a witness. The man nodded and pulled a black ID from around his neck. Supervisory Special Agent Marcos Delane. I was off duty, saw everything. You too, he pointed at the officers, might want to call this in yourselves before it gets worse. Reese's face turned beet red. Calloway finally stepped back, glancing around the park where at least 4 people were clearly recording now. You didn't have to make this a scene, Calloway muttered. You made it a scene the second you reached for cuffs without a single question, Kyla said. You forgot the first rule of tactical response. Calloway looked up. She finished, cool and precise, never engage until you know exactly who you're dealing with. 10 minutes later, the flashing red and blue lights of a supervisor unit pierced through the tree-lined entrance of Lincoln Park. The responding sergeant, an older man with sun-worn skin and a weary expression, stepped out of his cruiser, immediately clocking the tension in the air. He made his way through the crowd, noting both officers standing stiffly, and a composed woman flanked by a taller man holding a federal badge. Sergeant Lenton, he introduced himself briskly. Who's in charge here? I am, Kyla said, stepping forward. Special Agent Kyla Trent, Homeland Security Tactical Response. I was physically engaged by your officers without lawful cause. This man, she pointed to Calloway, initiated the use of force. His partner stood by and failed to intervene. Both ignored protocol, failed to verify identity, and have now placed themselves in violation of several federal statutes. Lenton's eyes shifted to Calloway. Is this true? Calloway looked defensive. We were responding to a complaint. She didn't produce ID. She didn't have to, Lenton said firmly, his voice rising. You need reasonable suspicion of a crime, not just someone jogging alone. Reese quietly added, I told him we didn't have enough. He moved in anyway. Kyla's expression didn't change. He also took my badge out of my hand without permission. That's tampering with federal property. Lenton turned to her. Agent Trent, may I examine your credentials, formally? She nodded and handed him her ID and badge. He studied them carefully. His face changed. Tier 4 Tactical, he said softly, his voice now carrying an edge of respect. You're not just DHS. You're one of the ones who train us. Kyla nodded once. The sergeant turned back to the two officers. You laid hands on a federal tactical trainer. In a public park. With no clear cause. Reese looked like he wanted to disappear. Calloway stayed silent, face hard, but pale. Kyla added, and for the record, I've logged 3 confirmed overseas deployments, have taught interagency field restraint protocols for 6 years, and both of you just gave me the worst case of déjà vu I've had since Kabul. Lenton took a long breath. Agent Trent, Agent Delane, you'll be filing an official statement. We already have it recorded, she said. Time-stamped. Location verified. Understood. Then, turning back to his men, Calloway, Reese, surrender your badges and weapons. You're on administrative hold until Internal Affairs makes a decision. The crowd let out a collective gasp. One woman near the front whispered, did she just get them pulled off the job? Kyla turned, finally ready to leave. You didn't just make a mistake, she said over her shoulder. You reminded everyone here why people lose trust in the badge. By the time Kyla left the park, the crowd had started to disperse, but the incident had already taken on a life of its own. Clips from phones were making the rounds online, some showing the takedown, others capturing her calm declaration of identity, and a few catching the exact moment Calloway and Reese were relieved of duty. Kyla and Agent Delane walked in silence for a few minutes, heading toward the lot where her car was parked. You handled that better than I would've, Delane finally said, shaking his head. Most people would have dropped them in 2 moves. I'm not most people, Kyla replied. And if I had, we'd be talking to a very different chain of command right now. Delane chuckled. They'll never live this one down. Words already moving through the bureau. You might have just trained half that department without even stepping in their classroom. Kyla paused beside her car, exhaling. That's not why I did it. I know, he said. But it matters. You reminded a lot of folks today that not everyone in plain clothes is powerless. She nodded, eyes distant. Funny, she said after a beat. I came here to clear my head. Been off the grid a few weeks. Thought the park would be quiet. Delane leaned against the passenger door. You sure you want to press full charges? Kyla looked over at him, unblinking. They assumed I was weak, alone, and disposable. That's what needs to be addressed. Not just for me, for the next person who doesn't have a badge in their pocket. He gave a respectful nod. Then I'll stand beside you every step of the way. Later that afternoon, Sergeant Lenton stood outside the precinct headquarters, facing a row of reporters. His statement was brief and pointed. An incident occurred earlier today involving 2 officers and a federal agent. An internal review is already underway. The department does not tolerate misuse of authority, and we are fully cooperating with federal oversight. Further details will be released pending investigation. Meanwhile, in a quiet office within DHS headquarters, an assistant handed a file marked, Priority Internal, Park Interference Report, Agent Kyla Trent, to the director's desk. He flipped it open, read the summary, and leaned back in his chair. Let's move her training seminar up 2 weeks, he said to his aide. Seems the city needs her sooner than we thought. 2 days later, The air inside the Regional Law Enforcement Training Center was thick with silence. A mixed group of officers, local, state, and federal, sat in rows beneath the glow of fluorescent lights, eyes fixed on the woman standing at the front. Kyla Trent. No uniform. No flashy gear. Just a plain charcoal blouse, sleeves rolled up, DHS badge clipped at her hip. Behind her, a large screen displayed a paused video. The frozen frame, Callaway mid-lunge, her sidestep already in motion. A live takedown turned training module. She turned to the room. "Before we begin, let me make something clear," she said. "This is not about embarrassment. It's not about punishment. It's about awareness." Click. The video began to play. Her own voice came through the speakers, calm, firm, recorded from her phone. "Special Agent Kyla Trent, Homeland Security Tactical Response." The room listened in full silence as the scene played out. When it ended, she turned back to the crowd. This was avoidable. The officers didn't recognize what they were escalating. Not because I was armed. Not because I was resisting. But because they saw someone who didn't look like a threat, until I became one. She walked to the center of the room. You don't get to control how someone looks. You only control how you engage. That's what this training is about. A hand slowly rose in the back. A young patrolman. "Ma'am," he asked carefully, "what if we're not sure? What if someone just feels off?" Kyla nodded. "Then you observe. You assess. You speak. You don't lay hands unless you're in danger or someone else is. That's not politics, that's procedure. And when in doubt." She tapped her badge. "You ask. Because if you assume, you might just find yourself flat on your back in a park with a dozen phones watching." Laughter broke out across the room, not mocking, but real, uneasy, humbled. Another hand went up. "Agent Trent, what happened to the officers?" "Pending review. One is suspended. The other placed on desk duty. But this class," she gestured around the room, "this is what I asked for instead. I'd rather prevent a mistake than punish it." A silence followed, but this one was different, thoughtful. She looked around, ending with, "Never underestimate someone who stays quiet, and always know who's standing in front of you." A week after the incident, the sun once again warmed the paths of Lincoln Park. The Eastern Trail, once the scene of confrontation, was quiet now, except for the steady rhythm of sneakers hitting gravel. Kyla jogged alone, just as she had before. No hoodie this time. No earbuds. Just the breeze, the rhythm, and her awareness of every step, every face, every glance. Not far ahead, two new patrol officers stood near a bench, watching people pass. One of them saw her approaching and gave a subtle nod, not out of suspicion, but recognition. Kyla returned it without slowing. They didn't stop her. She didn't need to flash a badge. She had made her point. At the far end of the trail, she slowed to a walk and sat beneath a shaded tree. Her phone buzzed, a message from DHS, field instructors requested. 3 precincts. Your name came up first. She stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "I'll take it. But I'm starting with the ones who haven't made the mistake yet." She looked around. Families, kids, couples, officers. No one stared at her now. No one closed in. And in that quiet, there was something close to peace. What happened in the park that day wouldn't be forgotten, not because of how it ended, but because of what followed. It didn't spark outrage. It sparked reform. And Kyla Trent, tactical trainer, field veteran, once mistaken for a threat, had reminded an entire department of one simple truth: respect isn't given based on uniforms. It's earned through awareness. And sometimes, it walks among you quietly, until it's called to stand. Back at the precinct, deep inside a glass-walled office, two men in suits sat across from Officer Reese. The blinds were drawn. The audio recorder blinked red on the table between them. "This is your final review interview," said the lead investigator. "And for the record, this conversation is being recorded for internal audit. Ready to proceed?" Reese nodded, his voice low. "Yes, sir." The investigator leaned forward. "Let's walk through the moment you approached Agent Trent. Did you believe she posed an immediate threat?" "No," Reese admitted. "She was jogging. Calm. No sudden movements. No verbal aggression. I knew it didn't feel right. I said something to my partner." "Then why didn't you intervene?" "I froze," Reese said. I'd seen Calloway push interactions before, but this time, he was so sure. And I thought, if I pushed back, I'd be the one in trouble. The second investigator, silent until now, tapped his pen. "You realize that makes you complicit in a use of force violation, right?" "I know," Reese said. "That's why I didn't fight the desk duty. But I want to make this right. I want more training. Real training." The lead investigator looked at his file. "Agent Trent specifically asked for your name to be included in the upcoming cross-training program. She said she saw hesitation, not hostility." Reese looked up, surprised. "She said that?" "She did. And that's not common." The man flipped the file closed. "You'll be reinstated to field duty after completion of the new training block, under her instruction. Consider it a second chance." Reese exhaled in relief, then asked quietly, "And Officer Calloway?" The room fell silent for a beat. The investigator replied, "Pending termination. Multiple prior complaints." Agent Trent's footage was just the last straw. Outside the office, a memo had been posted to the department bulletin board, effective immediately, all officers required to complete tactical interaction training, Module 7, Civilian Engagement with Undisclosed Federal Personnel. Instructor, Special Agent Kyla Trent. The department was changing, not out of fear, but because it had been confronted by someone who knew exactly how to teach without raising her voice. The training facility's largest room had been rearranged. Desks were cleared. Chairs moved to the edges. In the middle, a padded floor, simulation gear, and a row of clipboards labeled with names. At the front stood a tall woman in navy tactical pants and a black training shirt with DHS instructor stitched on the chest. Kyla Trent scanned the room as the first wave of officers entered, about 20 of them. Some were new recruits. Others, seasoned veterans. And near the back, quietly taking a seat, was Officer Reese. She noticed him immediately. Gave a single nod. He returned it, grateful, but humble. "All right," she began, stepping into the center of the room. "Today's lesson isn't about hand-to-hand combat. It's about posture. Perception. Assumptions. And how to avoid the kind of mistake that puts someone on a federal review board." She picked up a foam training baton and dropped it in the middle of the mat. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone. I'm here to prepare you. Because next time, it might not be a DHS agent you grab. It might be someone who doesn't survive that mistake." The room was quiet. She paced slowly as she continued. "You've all heard about the park. Some of you saw the footage. But today, you're going to learn what happened in that moment, how I moved, how I assessed, and why I didn't strike back." Then she turned, gesturing to Reese. "Officer Reese, join me on the mat." Murmurs. A few surprised looks. Reese stood, careful but steady, and stepped forward. "I know what you're thinking," Kyla said to the room. "But he's here." He owned his part. And he's willing to do the work. She tossed him a padded baton. Ready? Reese nodded. Yes, ma'am. Kyla smiled, only slightly. Good. Let's show them what hesitation looks like, and how to fix it. The room leaned forward as the two squared off, not in a fight, but in a lesson that would ripple through every precinct for months to come. This wasn't just a class. This was a correction. The training exercise with Officer Reese was short, deliberate, and instructive. Kyla didn't humiliate him. She walked him through each step, when he should have spoken up, how to read body language, how to pause before assuming threat. The rest of the class followed, one by one, walking through identical drills with her. She corrected stances, challenged assumptions, and rewired reflexes that had been too long shaped by bias and habit. By the end of the session, sweat and silence filled the room. Then Kyla spoke. I want every one of you to walk out of here with one core principle burned into your spine: presence doesn't equal suspicion. Silence isn't resistance. And authority means responsibility, not control. She walked slowly down the line of trainees. You carry a badge. So do I. But mine didn't protect me from your mistakes. It was my composure that did that. And the next person you stop may not have that composure. You won't get lucky twice. A pause. Then she added, do better, because now, you know better. Applause started slowly, then spread. Not loud, not performative, just a quiet show of respect. Reese approached her after class. I won't forget this, he said. Kyla nodded. Don't just remember it. Live it. Later that evening, Kyla sat at her kitchen table, a cup of green tea in hand. Her phone buzzed again. New message, DHS Director, great work. Positive feedback already. You've changed how they think. When you're ready, Quantico wants to bring you in next. She smiled faintly, setting the phone down. What started as a jog in the park had turned into a shift in the culture. Not through force. Through example. And through the quiet strength of someone who didn't need to raise her voice to be heard. 2 months later, Kyla Trent stood in a room far larger than any classroom she'd ever taught in. This time, it wasn't a training center or a park or a precinct basement. It was a national law enforcement summit in D.C. Behind her was a banner, Modern Policing, Ethics, Awareness, Response. Rows of law enforcement leaders from across the country filled the seats. Commanders. Chiefs. Instructors. Even federal brass. Cameras were rolling. Live streams were broadcasting. And Kyla, in her quiet, steady way, walked up to the podium with no script in hand. She looked across the crowd, then spoke. Not long ago, I was tackled in a park by 2 officers who didn't know who I was. That moment could have gone wrong in 100 ways. But it became something else, it became a mirror. She paused, letting it sink in. They didn't see a threat. They saw what they were taught to watch for, someone who didn't fit. But training must evolve. And so must instinct. Because law enforcement doesn't just protect, it reflects. And what it reflects tells the public who we really are. She pulled a small folded card from her pocket and held it up. This is now a required insert in training manuals across 3 departments. A code I helped rewrite. On the screen behind her, the words appeared: before action, assess. Before assumption, ask. Before force, verify. You don't need to dominate. You need to understand. Kyla closed with a line that echoed far beyond the summit: respect is not a response to power. It's a reflection of principle. The badge means nothing, if it isn't backed by discipline. The room stood as one. Not out of formality. Out of recognition. Kyla Trent had become more than a tactical expert. She was now a national voice in shaping the future of law enforcement. Not by tearing it down, but by making it see itself clearly. And in that clarity, something new had taken root. Accountability. And change.